1997. Apple was dying, not struggling, not slowing down, dying. The company that changed the world with the personal computer was now fighting for its own survival. Millions of dollars were disappearing every month. Customers were confused. Employees were losing confidence. And behind closed doors, Apple executives were facing a terrifying question. Can Apple actually survive? Because this wasn't just a bad year. This wasn't just a failed product. This was a company that had forgotten what made it special. The same company that once represented creativity and innovation had become a company with hundreds of products nobody understood. Apple had lost its identity, and Wall Street was already preparing for the possibility that Apple might disappear forever. But then, something happened that nobody saw coming. Apple made the most unbelievable decision in its history. They brought back the man they once pushed out. Steve Jobs, the founder who was fired from his own company, the man who watched Apple continue without him, the man many people believed was finished. But what nobody knew was that losing Apple was the best thing that ever happened to Steve Jobs. Because during the years away, he wasn't sitting around waiting for another chance. He was learning, he was building, he was becoming a completely different leader. And when Apple was finally on the edge of collapse, the company that rejected him needed him more than ever. But Steve Jobs wasn't coming back to simply save Apple. He was coming back to completely rebuild it. And the first thing he did shocked everyone. This is the story of how a company that was almost forgotten became the most powerful technology company in the world. Before Apple became one of the most valuable companies on earth, it started with two young people who believed something impossible. Computers shouldn't belong only to scientists. They shouldn't belong only to giant corporations. They should belong to everyone. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built a machine that challenged the entire technology industry, the Apple II. And suddenly, ordinary people could bring a computer into their homes. Apple wasn't just selling a device. It was selling a dream, a future where technology felt personal. Then came the Macintosh, a computer designed to be different. Simple, beautiful, human. Apple wasn't trying to make computers more complicated. It was trying to make them easier, and the world noticed. But behind the success, a dangerous problem was growing. Steve Jobs had a vision unlike anyone else. He wanted everything to be perfect. Every detail, every design choice, every experience. But that obsession created conflict inside Apple. Because sometimes, the same passion that creates greatness can also create chaos. And eventually, that conflict would lead to the most painful moment in Apple's history. The company Steve Jobs created would turn against him. The impossible happened. The company Steve Jobs built from nothing forced him out. Imagine spending your entire life creating something, building a dream, watching millions of people fall in love with it. And then one day, being told you are no longer needed. For Steve Jobs, Apple wasn't just a company. It was his identity. It was his creation. And suddenly, he lost it. Most people thought this was the end of Steve Jobs, a brilliant founder who couldn't control his own company, a visionary who failed. But failure did something unexpected. It changed him. Away from Apple, Jobs started a new company called Next. He invested in a small animation studio called Pixar. And while the world saw a man who had lost everything, Jobs was quietly preparing for the comeback nobody expected. He learned how to become a better leader. He learned patience. He learned that great ideas weren't enough. A company needed focus, discipline, and a clear vision. Meanwhile, Apple continued without him. At first, everything seemed fine, but slowly, something started breaking. The company that once changed the world was losing itself. By the 1990s, Apple had a problem nobody expected. The company that once represented simplicity had become incredibly complicated. Too many products, too many decisions, too many directions. Apple was no longer creating a clear future. It was chasing everything. Customers walked into stores and didn't know what computer they were supposed to buy. Performa, Quadra, Power Macintosh. The names kept growing. The confusion kept growing. Even Apple's own employees struggled to explain the difference between their products. And that was a dangerous sign, because when a company stops understanding itself, customers stop understanding it too. Meanwhile, Microsoft was taking over the world. Windows was everywhere. Businesses were choosing Microsoft. Consumers were choosing Microsoft. And Apple's advantage was disappearing. The company that once changed the computer industry was now fighting to stay relevant. Money was running out. Confidence was disappearing. And inside Apple, people started asking a terrifying question. How much longer can this continue? By 1997, Apple wasn't looking for another strategy. It was looking for a miracle. The board needed someone who understood what Apple was supposed to be. Someone who could bring back the original vision. Someone willing to make impossible decisions. And then, they made the choice nobody expected. They called back the man they once removed. Steve Jobs. But this time, he wasn't returning as the young dreamer who left. He was returning as the only person who might be able to save Apple. When Steve Jobs walked back into Apple, he didn't see a company ready for a comeback. He saw chaos. Hundreds of products. Thousands of decisions. Teams working without direction. Apple wasn't focused anymore. It was lost. So Jobs did something that shocked everyone. He started cutting. Products were canceled. Projects disappeared overnight. Entire teams were reduced. Many employees were angry. Some believed Jobs was destroying the company he came back to save. But Jobs understood something they didn't. Apple didn't need more products. It needed focus. It needed simplicity. It needed a reason for people to believe again. And then, he made his most controversial move. Microsoft, Apple's biggest rival. The company many Apple fans blamed for its problems. In 1997, Steve Jobs announced that Microsoft would invest $150 million into Apple. The reaction was immediate. People were shocked. Some fans were furious. They couldn't understand it. Why would Apple accept help from its biggest enemy? But Jobs saw the bigger picture. Because a company cannot win a war if it doesn't survive the battle. The deal gave Apple something it desperately needed. Time. But time alone wasn't enough. Jobs knew Apple needed something more powerful. Something emotional. Something that would make people fall in love with the company again. And then, in 1998, Apple introduced a product that looked completely different from anything else on the market. A product that many people underestimated. The iMac. And it would become the symbol of Apple's impossible comeback. In 1998, Steve Jobs needed a miracle. Apple had survived, but surviving wasn't enough. People still wondered, can Apple really come back? The answer arrived in a colorful plastic shell. The iMac. At first, many people didn't understand it. Why make a computer that looked so different? Why focus so much on design? Why make technology feel like a piece of art? But that was exactly the point. While competitors were creating boring machines designed only for offices, Apple created something people actually wanted to own. The iMac was simple, beautiful, different. It wasn't just a computer. It was a statement. Apple was saying, technology doesn't have to feel cold and complicated. It can be personal. People didn't buy the iMac only because they needed a computer. They bought it because it made them feel something. And after years of doubt, Apple finally had something it desperately needed. Hope. Sales increased. Confidence returned. And for the first time in years, people stopped asking, is Apple dying? They started asking, what's Apple going to do next? But Steve Jobs wasn't trying to create just one successful product. He wasn't trying to save Apple for a few more years. He was trying to rebuild the way people experience technology. And his next move would take Apple far beyond computers. In 2001, Steve Jobs entered an industry nobody expected: music. At the time, digital music was a complete mess. People carried around bags full of CDs. Downloading songs was complicated, and portable music players were frustrating to use. The experience was broken. Then Apple introduced a device that looked simple, but changed everything: the iPod. Its promise was unforgettable: 1,000 songs in your pocket. But the iPod wasn't just a music player. It was freedom. It was convenience. It was a completely new way to experience music. Apple had transformed itself from a computer company into a lifestyle brand. People weren't just buying Apple products anymore. They were buying into Apple's world. But Steve Jobs wasn't finished, because the biggest gamble of his career was still coming. In 2007, Apple stepped into an industry controlled by giants: the smartphone market. At that time, companies like Nokia and BlackBerry dominated the market. Many people thought Apple was making a mistake. Why would a computer company challenge phone companies? Why would anyone pay more for a touchscreen phone? But Steve Jobs saw something others couldn't. The future wasn't about carrying multiple devices. It was about combining everything into one simple experience: a phone, a camera, a music player, a computer, all in your pocket. When Jobs revealed the iPhone, the world watched. And within years, the companies that once controlled the industry were struggling to keep up. Apple wasn't following the future anymore. It was creating it. In 1997, Apple was fighting for survival. People predicted bankruptcy. Many believed the company would disappear. But less than 2 decades later, something almost impossible happened. The company everyone had written off became one of the most valuable companies in history. But Apple's comeback wasn't built on one lucky product. It was built on something much bigger: an ecosystem. The Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, the App Store. Together, they created something competitors couldn't easily copy: a world where millions of people didn't just buy Apple products. They became part of Apple's universe. But the most incredible part of this story isn't the money, it's the comeback. Because years earlier, Steve Jobs was removed from the company he created. People believed his best days were behind him. But he returned, rebuilt the company, and changed the entire technology industry. A founder who lost everything came back and saved the very company that rejected him. A company that was almost forgotten became a company that changed the world. Apple's story was never just about computers. It was never just about phones. It was about failure, loss, and the ability to rebuild. Because sometimes, the biggest comeback stories begin with the biggest failures. The people who write you off don't know how your story ends. Apple wasn't saved because it never failed. Apple was saved because it found its vision again. The same company that once rejected Steve Jobs became the company that needed him most. And that is what makes Apple's story unforgettable. A company that was almost gone before becoming one of the greatest businesses the world has ever seen.